Are you ready to get woke? Welcome to the Woke as podcast with your host, Alex Lazarev.
When I first, one of the guys on my team said, this might be a match. This might be someone you want to get on at the Infinite Man Summit. I put a video on for 2 minutes of yours, 2 minutes. And I just knew right away. That was it. And I went, yes. We spoke. You know, we had a little connection, and we were coming from the same place, same frequency, and I was like, awesome. You came to the event, and I saw you do your talks, and I was fucking blown away. But, so my impression is, it's just what I've seen you on Skype, in person. I have no idea what the world thinks, other than, I read your book. But I have no idea. And so, seeing you as the man you are today, without any ideas of other people, or I just don't know. It's very interesting, because what I want to do, and it's as simple as this. I actually want to get to know you, but really on a profound level, like what created this man here? How did you get to be who you are? How does this even happen? Because it is very, and I asked you a question. I asked you a question I was dying to ask you, actually, just 45 minutes ago, and the question was, how many people have you even met since you woke up? And for you said it was in your late 20s when you kind of got there to some degree. How many people have you met that were relatively high level of consciousness in their hearts at service, as we would say, on the team, on our team light, and aware of it, And you said 12 people, maybe. And that blew me away. It's just like, with all the people you've been, speaking publicly for, 20 odd years. 20 years. All over the world, entrepreneurs, crazy, just hearing your story. It's just an insane life of adventure. You must have met thousands of people. I wouldn't be surprised if you told me you'd personally had a conversation with more than 10,000 people. I would not find that hard to believe at all. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So for you to go 12, and for me to be in that group, which I am, that is surprising, shocking, and also the greatest compliment, and just makes me feel so lucky that for whatever reason I was able to get to this point myself. I just feel really, really blessed and blown away. Because there's not a lot of us out there. And certainly not a lot of us that have really, gotten to a certain level of success, out there in the world where they can have influence, So that's why for me, this is a huge, exciting opportunity to be able to sit here with you and really find out, where did you come from? What was it like? How did you come into this world, and what did you do to become who you are today? That is fascinating. That is fascinating. So, and I knew I was just there thinking about it in the bathroom, and I'm just like, I don't need any question. There is only one question. There's nothing to prepare. It's just like my soul on the deepest level wants to know, how did you become the man that you are sitting here today? That's it.
Where do you go with that? I'm
going to go into psychiatrist mode. So,
yeah. Interesting, obviously, is with advancing in the spiritual realm and the levels of consciousness as they increase, it allows a higher perspective for self-reflection. And I've looked a lot into my past and my background, because I'm a great believer as well that we're shaped through our formative childhood years, and a lot of our stuff gets developed there that really sets the benchmark for our journey of getting through that stuff to form the ingredients are put in for the recipe, and that's what leads to the quality of cake as things bake down the line. And I sometimes wish, sort of tongue in cheek, that I had this incredible story of being through all of these traumatic experiences, as I know many people, including yourself, have, that's very easy to point back to. And I find it hard to identify, because my memories, my earliest memory, I think I was about 3 years old, was in a cafe with my mom. I didn't actually know that my dad was in prison for the first 3 years of my life. I didn't know that until I was 13. So my early memories are really me and mum, and I have flashbacks of that. My father was a proud, powerful man. Loved him to bits, completely adored my dad. But I also know that growing up, certainly through my teens, I didn't have that level of strong connection with him. And part of that probably was because, the bond was already built very strongly with my mum. But, my mum and dad had a, for all intents and purposes, functional relationship. I had a great childhood. I did. I had a happy childhood. We had a big back garden. I was an outdoor kind of guy. I remember my mum turning around to me one time. She said something that kind of struck me, and I think I was about 12. And it's one of those times where, you really want to be an adult because they get to go to bed when they want, and all of that kind of stuff. And, I want to be able to have money in my own pocket to go buy my bike, which adults can do. And I remember Mum turning around and she says, "Honey, don't ever wish away your childhood because you only get one." And that really struck me. It really made me realize that, whoa, that's the point, yeah. I've got none of the worries that they seem to be talking about. My food shows up. I've got a roof over my head I don't have to worry about a mortgage for. My biggest issue is getting my homework done. And I felt safe. I mean, one interesting energy dynamic with the home was that my mother was very religious. She was a special minister for the Catholic Church. My father was an atheist. He came from a kind of a violent, gang-based sort of, teddy boy, as they're called in those days. So the background, he was very well respected. His best friend's sister was married to Charlie Cray out of the Crays. If the term the Leicester Mafia was ever used, it would definitely include my father's name in there at some point. And but it was another term that I would throw out there, which I don't know if translates over to the sort of US listeners, but what they were called ODCs, or ordinary decent criminals. Which means they would rob banks. They would they wouldn't rob old ladies. They would help the old lady across the street. If anyone in the community was doing something like drugs or anything, they'd be dealt with. But the ordinary decent criminals are people who are just like basically screwing the system and carving out their own deal. So there was a code, and I think that rubbed off. But the other thing that really, I guess, affected me, and I wasn't aware at the time, was that my mother being a very strong sort of religious background and my father being atheist and not into that stuff, he would completely hold a space for my mother to have her beliefs. And he would open his home to her friends to come, and he called them the God Squad. Right? And if the God Squad wanted to come around, he'd go to the pub, but he'd have no problem opening his home and having my mum's religious statues all over the house and whatever. And my mother would never try to force her religious beliefs onto my father. And I guess unconsciously, that taught me something that is a big milestone, or certainly a big attribute on your journey of self-discovery in terms of maturity, emotional maturity. And that's having tolerance for other people's points of view, rather than judgment. And I see that. Looking back now, I think that was a major factor in me developing powers of holding a space for people, understanding, not being too quick to criticize or judge or be right about the fact you're wrong. And I think that was vicariously a very powerful lesson for me growing up. But there was no real significant emotional events that scarred. I mean, there was one part, and I don't know how fast you want to go through the childhood, but you asked me the question earlier, Sasha, that when do I think I woke up? And I remember some very profound steps in that process. And one was, I was actually at an event in Hilton Head in Carolina. And it was a Tony Robbins event. And I had this profound shift. I was trying to be a trainer, which by the very definition means you never will be one, because you either are and you own it regardless of rank, badge, or approval, or you don't. You're still trying to get there. Many people, as in entrepreneurs, are trying to become an entrepreneur by getting a successful business, rather than realize that you're an entrepreneur or you're not, regardless of whether you have a business or not. In fact, if you're an entrepreneur without a business, you'll likely go find one or set one up, because that's what entrepreneurs do. And a lot of people validate themselves through acquisition, rather than realize that who they show up determines what they acquire. And so I was trying to be a trainer, and all of the trainers kind of agreed that I wasn't ready. And I was a little perturbed, and one of the master trainers, a beautiful woman called Debbie Battersby, who I learned an enormous amount from, beautiful soul, she pulled me aside and she said, I think one of the things is that you kind of sometimes go into presentation mode. Yeah, sound familiar? Yeah. And she said, it is very disconnecting. At that point, the intention wasn't to go into presentation mode to serve. It was, I need to look a particular way, otherwise I'll be judged. But it triggered off an insight and awareness that completely floored me. It took me out for almost 2 days. I couldn't function. And that was that I realized that I was more worried about what I thought people thought of me than I was trying to be authentic or serve. And what really, the part that floored me was that I looked back in my life, and every single memory that I had wasn't a memory, because I was seeing myself in the scene. That can't be a memory, because I didn't, that would require a third camera for me to look at. In other words, every perception that I had of myself from the past was a construct that my brain had created from the perception of how do I think other people see me in that. And when you wake up to the fact you don't have memories, you have constructs based upon the good opinion of others, a lifetime? Come on. And that made me realize how much goop, the good opinion of other people, was running my life at a fundamentally unconscious level. And that had a massive share. It wasn't immediate, but the awareness was so profound. It really allowed me to say, I am not going to stand for living a life that isn't even, where my memories aren't even my own. They're constructs of my brain that are seamlessly created to see me in the scene as if somebody else is looking at. And that set me off on a big quest. That was a major tipping point. Another major, point of my life that was a tipping point was that I can identify, and identified in doing some of the work in personal growth, was when I was 10 years old. And this was a major part of my journey. I was at private school, and I was one of the only people in my neighborhood at private school, because I was born and lived on what we call a council estate, kind of like low-cost government housing. So all of my friends were going to the local, low-cost government housing school, the state school. And that's kind of a dice. You roll the dice and you either do well or you don't. But the teachers are not paid to get you through class. They're paid to teach a curriculum, and your job is to get yourself through class. Whereas in a private school, the reason you're paying for a high-level education is because the teachers are there to drag you across the finish line. So my mother and father, we weren't rich, obviously, by any means, even close, but they wanted a good education for their son. So they put me in a private school. And I was at the Leicester Grammar I was 10 years old. And at the end of the year, the term fees were so expensive. My parents, they were like about £2,000 a term. This is back in 1982 for working class kind of parents. And they were going to increase the term fees. So after 1 year, my mother pulled me aside and she says, look, we're struggling to afford the school fees, but if you want to stay on, I'll go get another job. So we can do it, but it means you won't see me in the evening. Or you can go to the state school where you'll see me, but you're going to lose that kind of push to help you get this education. Now, at that point, I was still indoctrinated into the cultural beliefs that you need an education to be successful, because that's what my beliefs my parents had, because that's what they grew up with. And in the 60s, it was far more evident around that than it is today. Careers mattered a little more back then, because you were still transitioning out of that model into today, where careers mean nothing. Education means almost as much. So I wanted to see my mum. I didn't want to lose, seeing my mum, so I decided that I was going to go to state school. So I left, we finished the year in whatever it was, June, and then we had the summer holidays before we start the year again in September. During those 8-9 weeks of summer holidays, my mother constantly kind of dug into me from a place of love. The intention was there, but it was, listen, if you don't work hard at this new school, you will end up emptying the dustbins of the people that you were just at school with. If you don't get your education and go to university, you'll amount to nothing. And in short, she scared the crap out of me for not being able to produce the result off my own back. Now, the upside to that was in those 8-9 weeks, I became a lifelong overachiever. It didn't help me much on the academic front because I still struggled at school. I was never really naturally clever. I came 21st out of 20 on the entrance exam for Leicester Grammar out of 100 people, so I couldn't actually get in, but one person dropped out, and so I scraped in. I was the bottom of the catchment barrel there. So I became, and I could trace back everything at that point to becoming an achiever. Everything I did from that point in my life up until my late 20s, when I woke up at that other point, I was the best. I was not going to not be the best, because I linked not being the best to massive pain, non-approval of parents, because mum would obviously be upset if I didn't get my university degree. Not only that, but I'd be sleeping on a park bench for the rest of my life, and all of this other story. And so that was a big part for me that made me excel. Again, two-edged sword. And the challenge with overachievers that I found is that, and certainly for me, was, yes, it made me massively successful by my early 20s. I dropped out of school at 16 because that was never going to happen. I recognized that if you get paid even $1,000 a week for a job, which was unheard of back then, it means the job must be worth more than $1,000 a week. Otherwise, there's nothing in it for the person that's giving you the job. So by the very definition of having a job, it means you're earning less than what you're worth. I didn't resonate with that. Why would I limit myself? So I dropped out of school at 16. I started my first business at 17, and by 2021, I was financially successful. I was independent and massively unhappy. So because the primary question, and this is a concept I learned from Tony Robbins, we all have an unconscious primary question that drives us, that we ask below the radar constantly, several dozen times a day almost. And for many people, it's linked to the primary fear, which is the fear that we're not enough. Thea's primary question when I went through the exercise with her was, what do people think of me? So every behavior unconsciously is filtered through that, and you're going to adapt to avoid or be in alignment with the truth around that statement. For me, my primary question was, how can I achieve more? And the challenge with that is that, I go buy my first Ferrari for cash, in my early 20s, and it feels great for 20 minutes, but then the question, how can I achieve more? So it's a tunnel with no cheese. There's no finish line on that deal. And it made me massively unhappy, because I thought, well, clearly I just need a better Ferrari, and then I'll be happy. Clearly I must need a fourth business, a fifth, a sixth, an eighth business, with all of the stress and hours a week and bullshit that came with it, putting me into a place where I fell asleep driving home at 2 a.m. one time, hit an intersection at 60 miles an hour, nearly killed myself, and actually woke up at that point thinking, what the hell am I doing? And here I am building a monster that's trapping me. Why? So I can prove to the world I'm good enough when the world really doesn't give a crap? They're too busy being worried about what they think I'm thinking of them. I didn't know that at the time. But so there's definitely been some tipping points that have allowed the awarenesses to come, but nothing that I would say would be kind of traumatic from that perspective in terms of suffering and abuse, but certainly moments of realization that have shifted my point of view, or my level of understanding in my relationship to the world. And I'm sure there's more we could probably talk through as well, but they're some of the ones that kind of stand out.
It's interesting, because I almost assume, like you said some things at your talk, that resonated with me so much. And Jeff Burke was saying the same stuff. You know, when you said you dropped out at 16, I was like, fuck, I knew it. Because, you know, I dropped out also at 15. And we just, you know, the people that are going to have what it takes, that are really independent thinkers, that are you know, that are really that they're not doing jobs. They're not going to go to university. They're just not. They're just going to be like, fuck this. There's no way. So for me, I always find very often those people that I connect with that are also just like, fuck this, I'm doing my own thing. I don't, you know, they're often really traumatized from childhood. They're people who have been through some shit. Because what I found, a big pattern in my life, the people who really excel and go outside the system and don't play by the rules and are really just their own people, they had to endure some shit. They had to go through some heavy crap to be able to become who they are. They had to overcome, you know? So, and for me, I joke around with certain people that it's hard for me to even connect with people, like on a deep level, that haven't been through some real shit. It's hard. So I just, being a force of nature, I'm like, oh, he's going to have some good stuff for me. He's going to be fucked up. Abuse, alcoholism, getting beat up, just the shit. Oh, it's going to be good. He's going to make my childhood seem like a cakewalk. I can't wait for this. And then you're sitting there like, no, it's all right, mate. You know what I mean? Because for me, it was, you know, just, you don't know me, so I talk about it a lot. But very briefly, no father figure, and that's one thing we had in common. My dad just left when I was 3 because my mom was just insane. She just went like rageaholic. So maybe just yelling and screaming. Her face was red, beating the shit out of me all the time, yelling at me, telling me I'm no good, I'll never amount to anything. But constantly, and then maybe for 10 minutes of the day, really sweet and nice. But I could never enjoy that 10 minutes because I know it's coming next. So it was horrible until I just ran away from it at 15 and, you know, was homeless for a month, youth hostels, dropped out of school, everything, and then just made my own way from there. But all that adversity, man, I mean, like life, there's no, I don't even see challenges in life. Yeah. There's no challenges. Life's easy. I look at people and their problems and I try not to laugh in their face. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Oh, yeah. Born in Canada, and I don't know, I just can't seem to do anything in life. You could do anything in life. What your worst case scenario was like the government feeds you, and you have a shitty apartment that they pay. That's your worst case. You have fear should not be in your reality ever with any Western rich country passport. There is no fear. You either can succeed or fail, and just try again. Yeah, there is zero chance of death here. Zero. Yeah. Just like, I'm just eating these shitty noodles and crappy, sleeping on a mate's couch, but that's the worst. So it's really so I get frustrated when I see these people when they're just living their safe lives with their safe jobs and whatever, and I'm just like, take a risk. What are you doing? Anyway. So I'm a bit disappointed, Peter. I gotta say. No, I jest, but
it's interesting because what I found in my experience is that the lower the level of consciousness, and again, there's a state of consciousness and a stage of consciousness. Somebody may be a high stage or potential for high stage, but due to certain belief systems and their model of the world, they're in a low state of consciousness at that point. Usually around the rules they have around what has to happen for them to be happy. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a low state of consciousness, you learn more from painful experiences than you do pleasurable ones. Mm. And sometimes, to realize people's true potential, they need that slap in the face from life in order to get their attention or wake them up. Mm. And that slap could be a story about a childhood. It could be a cancer diagnosis. It could be a failed business, or a fear of death, or whatever it may be. Mm. And so, looking at that as an addition to your story will bring more slaps. Mm. Looking at that as a potential, hey, it's time to get out of bed here and seize the day, will usually lead to a life of greater levels of awareness. Mm.
So it sounds like you had the programming like we all had, right? So your programming was that story that you have to achieve more, that you're not going to be enough. For me, it really was I'm not good enough. I don't love myself, and what did people think about me? Those were my stories, for sure. And they're still there, but they're just and
that's humanity. I call it the primary human fear because every human has it. There's two learned fears which are, two inherent fears, which are the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. That's kind of what we're born with. Everything else is a learned fear. And it's so prevalent, it's probably worth looking a little bit about where most of that comes from for people. And from my experience, it really is a case of being conditioned by our earliest memory, which is 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. That at that point we've had years of being trained that love is conditional, and we get approval from parents if we do something right, and the perception of that approval is withdrawn if we don't. Growing up and projecting that into our own relationships, is the reason why many of them are so dysfunctional. Because it's now your job to please me, and if I'm unhappy, it's somehow your fault. Or you need to see my model of the world because that's the only one that exists, and I don't have the mental capacity to open up to appreciate other people's model of the world or what they're thinking. Everyone's so self-interested based upon their whole dealing with their own issues and primary fear, that there's very little empathy. Which is one of the natural signs of raising consciousness, is you feel more empathy. It's not a gateway, it's a byproduct. The gateway is being able to get off your own sense of egocentric agenda. As a result of that, one of the byproducts is you now start being more caring than selfish. You now start being more focused on other than self. You now start realizing that the world doesn't revolve around you and your needs, but instead that in order to survive in this multiplayer virtual reality game we call life, that one has to understand it's a team sport, rather than who can accumulate the most stuff at the expense of stepping on people to get it. That's part of the journey.
Here's an easy question for you, Mike. Being aware of this pattern, right, that you got to achieve more and being conscious of it, is it still there? Because you're at service now and you're doing good, is it just being used positively, or maybe there's still that part of you that feels you do want to get to the next level?
Yeah, there's a whole aspect of us that is ran from our unconscious patterns. And the awareness of those patterns is the first step. Also, the cost of awareness is responsibility, which is why so many people know what to do, but they don't do what they know. Because smokers know they shouldn't smoke, but the awareness of that, if they owned it at their core, would compel them to act on that awareness and quit. And they don't want to do that. So they go to the first chapter of the awareness and they shut down. The first level of intellect and shut down. So, being aware that those patterns are there when it comes to personal growth, if you have an intention, if you have the will with a capital W, the spiritual will to want to progress and move forward, then it's the starting point, the catalyst for working on that. It's a case of, hey, here's your issue. Now it's up to you to go work on it. Or it's like, here's the issue. Let me just paper over that and ignore it, the fact that I saw it. And, it's like the big questions, why am I here? Where did I come from? Well, I'll just ignore that because it's easier to distract myself and feel more significant about making money at work. So, for me, the awareness that those patterns are there compel you to address them. And that's not for everybody, because not everybody's on the path. I think Buddha that said, to be born a human is exceptionally rare. To be born a human, with spiritual on the spiritual path is rarer still. And the rarest of the rare are those that actually walk the path. And so, when I mentioned earlier, there's only 12 people that I've really met of the last 20 years that I would say calibrate, if you go back to Hawkins, in the 500s or more, is kind of where I took the question to be. I would say yes, a dozen authentically people. Now, myself, I would say, one of my, I'm not academically gifted, but I'm very grateful. I seem to have a pretty sharp mind, outside of the confines of the academic structure. And so reason has always been something I've been fairly au fait with. I look at something and I can logically deduce, many different aspects of it. The challenge with that, it keeps you out of your heart, because your head's now your primary tool. So for me, the aspect that I'm conscious of, that I'm consistently working on, is that leading from the heart, because I can figure stuff out very easy. Ask me a question, I can give you some really good advice. But walking down the street from the heart, 8 steps out of 10 is good. And we're there 10 out of 10, definitely not. May not need to be here if I was.
That's what it all comes down to, and it's really this is what we were talking about. And I guess this is where the conversation is going to go, because it's an interesting thought that just came into my head. Can you even be high consciousness and not be in the heart? And I've actually met people that they have a lot of information, they're super smart, and they understand many spiritual concepts, abundance and how things work and reincarnating. They can talk, amazing, but you feel them talk, and you're like, they're not here.
499.
And yeah. Maybe they're 499 and they're absolutely brilliant, but they're just not. They're not there. Or maybe they're there sometimes and.
Let's say states and stages. Where do you live? Where do you visit? But if you visit a place quite often, you tend to start living there, and that's where peer group comes in. You check your friends. What level of consciousness are your friends? That's the first thing I assess now. And for me, the reason is a beautiful place to be. And again, one of the things understanding levels of consciousness, and again, we're mapping this back to the sort of power versus force map of consciousness that Hawkins uses for those that are not familiar. There are no good or bad, better or worse aspects of that. There's only a more pertinent level or a more applicable level of expressing potential. Again, what's better, a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old? A 3-year-old or a 5-year-old? A small tree or a big tree? A sapling or an acorn? There's no right or wrong. They're just on different parts of the timeline of evolution or expression of their potential. Now, when you see that and you understand it, and you see someone in the 400s that are coming from a place of brilliance, like your Einsteins, your Sir Isaac Newtons, all the people that have given us the sciences and the wonder and the majesty that's created the world that we appreciate, you realize that in the 400s, content is more definitive than context. The second you cross the 500 into love, context becomes more primary than content. And so you can usually tell somebody who's in the 400s that are brilliantly academic, but they'll give you the formulaic equation for love, and you hug them and there's nothing there. So it's fairly self-evident. Does it mean they're right or wrong? No, it means on this particular year in Earth School that they're going through, or lifetime, or stage or state, that's where they're at. And everyone has its role. So if you're hovering down at the lowest levels around guilt or shame, or even apathy, which is where you find a lot of people today apathetic. And part of the reason that is they're disillusioned with society, the government, the routine, the drudgery. They know that there's more to their life being here than 9 to 5 paying taxes and dying out of a degenerative disease caused by government guidelines on diet. So there's a lot of apathy around that because there's no way out. So if you're apathetic and you're getting sand kicked in your face, even literally or figuratively, but let's take a literal example. You get a little wimpy kid on the beach who's all sad because he hasn't got the muscles or whatever, or he's just got really shy or introverted. And shy is please don't let you discover me. That's all shy is. It's because I'm scared of being judged. So they're afraid of getting in the game. But you have someone who's coming from pride or anger even, and it says, what the hell are you doing getting sand kicked in your face? Punch the son of a bitch back. Now, from anger, that's a more appropriate response than being walked all over in apathy. If you're there as a neutral country in apathy and somebody's going to come and invade, you've got to put a call into the army, right? Stand up for yourself. But you go past 200 and you start getting into more the sort of the political domains of the sort of diplomatic aspect of the 300s, and you're sitting around the table in the United Nations and somebody disagrees with you or tries to take advantage, punching them in the face is no longer a fairly sensible option. We grow out of that. You get to a place of non-duality at 600 and you realize there's nothing to be angry about. It's all one. So, every level of consciousness simply is a more appropriate choice than the level before it. That's all. So, not having coming from that place, you don't get the spiritual ego involved, which is, well, hey, look where I'm at, and look where only you're at. Yeah, or no, this is a better way to do things. What are you playing at? Now, you recognize everyone is perfect at the level they're at, and if they're able to take the step forward on their journey for their own reasons, not yours, then that's the journey that will help them move forward.
Yeah, and that's something I'm struggling with now. I would say the spiritual ego because I've had so many jumps, and recently. It's weird. It's like this dichotomy because I recognize that I've had the absolute clarity of like everyone is exactly where they need to be in their soul's journey, exactly. And at the same time, I see some people and they're just stuck and they're not even trying, and it's just like, come on, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's that's a practice for me. It's just totally just being like, no, it's perfect, and it doesn't matter where I'm at. It's just whatever level I get to is always the beginning of that level, and there's no end. Even when you hit enlightenment, there's so many levels, and it just goes on forever, like literally forever. So
on that concept, I believe that we're in, let's call it Earth School. This physical reality has some pretty tight rule sets. We can't jump 50 feet in the air. We can't walk through walls. There's physical laws that govern how this classroom is set up. And there's a reason for that. We are growing consciousnesses here. We are evolving over what we would perceive to be geological time and lifetimes. But if we do get to a point where we hit non-duality from an authentic place, there's so much love there. You've had your heart opened in the high 500s. You know what that's like. There's no reason to be here unless you're just emanating to be a teacher. Once you finish school at 16, if you do, but let's say the average person finishes school at 16, they can't stay. They have to go to college. Now, I believe the next level here is a reality that has far less of the tightness of the rule sets that we have in physical matter reality. Because if we had a pretty loose rule set here, we'd be teleporting into the bank vault, or we'd be teleporting into the ladies' changing rooms, because we don't have that level of emotional, spiritual maturity with how to use that. It's the same reason you wouldn't leave, a loaded 9mm in a playground. Right? Something bad's going to happen. But would you blink twice if it was on the table in a special ops briefing room? Well, no, because those guys know how to handle it. No one's going to pick up this. What's this, and start pulling triggers. Right? So. For where we are right now, our journey in Earth School, in this physical matter reality, which is essentially a subset of something more fundamental that consciousness drives or is derived from, in my belief, we're here to learn how to grow up. Now, once you hit the levels of enlightenment, what's the point in being here when college has probably got a lot less rule sets and more opportunities to grow even further? Make sense?
Yeah, of course. They say when I've heard stories. You hit a certain level, and you're just like, people check out.
Yeah,
they check out. But I think you would get. I know we have real free will, so you would have the choice. So if you're really done here, but some stay because they realize there's so much they can do from that level. So they say, okay, even though it's a lot more fun in the next level, this level really needs me. So
yeah, and if you look at the calibrations that Hawkins did, people that reach 600, 1 in 5 choose to stay, 4 in 5 leave at 600.
Really? No shit. Wow. That's interesting, a little bit scary. Really, because me and some friends, we're going to get there. It feels like we're going to get there. So it's like, I guess that's a great choice to have,
Yeah, and again, you graduate with honors at school, and why would you stay unless you want to be a teacher?
Right.
Or a volunteer to come back and support, and that's perfect. And there's, the calibration just before he died, which was in 2012, what was coming true was there was less than 7 people in the world that calibrated higher than 700. That's the level of refinement and exponentially high consciousness. And most of those were not known to the public. They were just either in a monastery or in a cave, and they were just there emanating. But without the counterbalance of that small number of people, the world would have tipped a balance back under 200 and gone into anarchy. And from that perspective, that's why they chose to stay, because they were kind of needed collectively at that point. And I haven't met, but I do know of one of them, and he is actually putting out a lot of specific frequency in 23 hours a day of meditation just to counterbalance a lot of the lower frequencies. And because it's logarithmic, it's exponential, that's what happens, you know. So you look at Nelson Mandela. He comes out at forgiveness, and he's counterbalancing 30 million people in the country that are anger and pride, saying, "Screw it, now it's our turn. Let's persecute the whites." But no, he comes out, and what does he say? Hey, if I can forgive them, what excuse have you got? And he united the country under the genius banner of the Rainbow Nation. And it wasn't just blacks against whites. It was it was every kind of tribal shade against each other at that point. That the country was simmering on the bridge of a power struggle and civil war as the apartheid regime was actually moved out. But that one man who essentially became what I believe the 20th century's greatest living leader was able to counterbalance 30 million people just at his level of calibration, which ultimately went to a high level of unconditional love.
Yeah, it's insane, and I actually hadn't thought about him deeply since getting into all the consciousness stuff and everything. So, yeah, you got to be pretty high level.
Again, he said, I knew that when I came out of prison, if I brought my resentment with me, I'd still be in jail. Great quote.
Yeah, that's a good quote. Man, I'm yawning. I only the last few nights I'm sleeping like 4 hours, so I'm sitting here like and I'm just like, oh, why am I yawning? Peter's gonna think I don't like him. I was like, no, I'm sorry. I'm just so tired.
I don't think that projection's ever gonna land this side of the table.
That's good. So now I'm gonna do a big fucking yawn. Oh, fuck.
Rapport. See.
Oh my god.
When you understand the physiology behind yawning, you'll never stifle another one.
Yeah.
It literally has more stimulation of positive brain chemistry.
Is that right?
Than virtually any other bodily function that you can do.
Okay, good. Well, I'm just gonna fucking yawn, man. It's like, and remind myself, no interviews the day after a whole 3-day event.
You're doing great.
Fuck, my body was getting used to just sleeping less, and I know I can do it, but you just get used to 8 hours and sleep 8 hours. You get used to 6. So last night I woke up naturally after 4 because that's just what I've been getting close to, and I was just like, even though I'm a bit tired, I know I'm okay. I'm all right.
It's funny, because I had a conversation with Thea yesterday. We have a very good friend of ours called Doc Parsley, who is a former Navy SEAL. He was the physician for the West Coast SEALs.
He's more coming.
And he's America's pretty much foremost expert on sleep. Good friend, great guy. Knows all the other gang, from Jocko to Ferris and all of that. And I just had the pleasure of being with him and his partner Christina Wise, who runs another great podcast, at their home in Austin for a week. But he spent a long time going over the sleep data, and it's the only area of medicine that's pretty much incontroversial because it's the one area where they all agree. And now, one thing I was talking to Thea about yesterday says, because he convinced me that I needed more sleep. But one of the things that hasn't been studied is the correlation between the requirement of sleep and your level of consciousness. Because to me, you would naturally need less sleep if you're a high level of consciousness because you have far less stress. There's far less to repair. There's, it's not about age. It's not about, maturity. But, it just seemed that I've always been happy with less sleep. My body's, would reject more than 6 hours sleep. And, the sleep debt that builds is if I have less than that. But, since speaking to Kurt, I've been getting 7 and 8, thinking that I need that to sort of catch up. And my morning routine's been suffering a little around there. But, it'd be interesting to correlate that when you say, 4 hours, I'm okay, I'm done. The golden rule is listen to your body. Not listen to your excuses, but listen to your body. But, it'd be interesting to do a study around levels of consciousness correlating to how much sleep requirement is and its impact on the physiology.
That would be super interesting.